Hey guys, it's time to Nefas and chill. In this video, we'll be going over the best races to choose to optimize your specific roles you wish to fulfill in any PvE content in the Elder Scrolls Online with Update 30, otherwise known as the Blackwood chapter. As a forward, this guide is more for those who wish to squeeze out as much damage, healing, or stats as much as possible. You do not need to play on these races I'll be talking about to actually be able to clear content, get skins, trifectas, or do overland content. If you are score pushing or doing endgame progression, that is also a very different story, and even then your choice of race can be open-ended depending on your role, along with raid or group composition. Post Flames of Vision DLC or Update 29, the previously big chasms between multiple races in terms of DPS numbers and so forth have actually narrowed down to what many could argue to be insignificant. Although when comparing the least optimal race in terms of DPS to the most optimal race, there's still a few percentage differences. If you guys would like to just read about what each race does, or rather has in terms of passives and what we would definitely recommend them for, definitely head on over to the ESO University website. The link to this article is in the description below, where you can read about their passives, how much stats each race gets, what they do, and what we recommend them for. Now let's talk about the stamina DPS races first. The top three I would pick for the stamina DPS races if I were to squeeze out as much damage as possible are going to be the following: Dunmer, Khajiit, and Orsimer, or Dark Elf, Khajiit, and Orc. And the reason being is that these top three races have been shown in both raids and of course the 21 mil dummy parses to yield the highest damage with multiple setups. But also we do have to take note that there were racial passive changes recently, especially to Orc, where Orc is now being outperformed by Dark Elf or Khajiit slightly. And when compared to the High Elf even, it's actually kind of pretty close as to how much damage they can pull off, or rather their high DPS ceiling they can get to. For the Khajiit, you have a health recovery and stamina and magic recovery boost, but the biggest thing of course is its maximum health, magic, and stamina increase, which does rival the Orc health passive, in addition to getting a boost to a critical damage and critical healing passive by 12%. Orcs, in the meantime, they did get a slight nerf to their maximum stamina pool. Now it is 1,000. They do get a 1,000 max health increase, but again, Khajiit rivals that health. While you do get a free heal every 4 seconds with the Unflinching Rage passive, the weapon and spell damage that the Orcs also get also do get matched by the Dunmer, which also does get more stamina by 910 more. In addition, you can make an argument that depending on the trial, that the flame resistance of Dunmers also will outmatch Orcs, although we'll talk about this later on, particularly for the Magicka races. In terms of the weapon and spell damage offered for Dark Elves, they also do rival the Orcs. These are the top three, and I know there have been some parses where High Elves do out DPS Orcs, but the difference ultimately is that small, so in the end, these are the top races I would definitely pick for stamina DPS races for Blackwood or Update 30. For the Magicka races, the top three races I would pick would be Khajiit, High Elf, and Dunmer, or Khajiit, Altmer, and Dark Elf. So Khajiit, again, is kind of in the top three pretty much consistently across both stamina and Magicka DPS races due to the recent buffs. In addition, we'll talk about this here, with the addition of a new mythic, in particular the Harpooner's Kilt, which does offer crit, Khajiit is going to match perfectly well with that new mythic that can be used pretty much almost everywhere in both 4-man and 12-man content in PvE, and you can also use it in solo content. If the Kilt was not really adjusted in PTS week 3 or 4, I believe, then High Elf would have been probably slightly ahead of Khajiit, but in general, Khajiit and High Elf are very, very, very close. Dunmer, on the other hand, slightly behind, but then again, we're going to talk about the flame resistance that Dunmer gets, especially in relation to the new 12-man trial coming out, Rockgrove, which does have quite a lot of flame damage. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't seem like the flame resistance of Dunmer really makes that much of a difference ultimately in any content that has a lot of flame damage. It does make some difference, but the boost to health stats from Khajiit does also make up for that, and which kind of evens out between both races. So again, the top 3 races I would pick for the Blackwood patch and onwards, unless they change racial passes, is going to be Khajiit, Altmer, and Dunmer. Now let's talk about healer races. Healer races are a little bit more complicated than DPS races because, again, you're not really outputting damage, you're outputting healing, but also in a lot of cases, especially even in trials, you are doing damage. However, when it comes to just base healing and also sustain, it's really hard to beat Breton, which is why it's going to be number 1 in this top 3. So the top 3 for my healer races for Blackwood and onwards would be Breton, Altmer, and then pretty much it's going to come down to between Khajiit and Argonian. Khajiit again because of the damage, and also they do get more crit healing. Argonian has always kind of been a staple race in the past 29 updates for the Elder Scrolls Online because of its innate healing done, but it's not as strong as the raw weapon and spell damage that the High Elves get, but also you don't really get sustained through Argonian besides the potion passive, and Breton in the meantime gets a innate cost reduction, max Magicka, and innate resistances that can get boosted depending on the fights for spell resistances. So again, these would be my top 3 races for Breton, High Elf, and Khajiit or Argonian, and everything else after that. Tank races are, again, a bit more complicated compared to DPS races or even healing races. This has been a topic of intense discussion or debate in recent months, because the problem with tanking in the Elder Scrolls Online PvE is more of a matter of mechanics and knowledge. Even if you were to, say, get a stats-dense race like Imperial for your max health or max stamina, it doesn't really help when you're just dying to one-shots that you just can't really avoid. For example, you don't know if you can... new players or new tanks or beginner tanks just don't know how much damage they can take or what damage is incoming or what mechanics to watch out for. So the knowledge will eventually or ultimately help out more so than that, which is why a lot of people always will say, including myself, that you can tank on absolutely any race. Will there be certain races for certain situations that will yield more benefits in terms of either a composition thing or a fight matter? Yes, there will be. And my top 3, if I had to choose the top 3 tank races, would be Nord, Imperial, and then pretty much everything else. And you can kind of choose between Breton, Altmer, and Orsimer. And I'll explain these choices here because, again, there's another debate too between Nord and Imperial. Now, Nord does get the ultimate generation. They did get a nerf to their resistances. However, the resistance nerf did not really it wasn't really significant, because you can make up for it with the passive champion points or other methods, and also mitigation is not that always of a huge factor in terms of resistance numbers. Imperial, you can also make people have made the argument that the Imperial cost reduction, not just for their skills, offers sustain, but also for their ultimate cost, offers more ultimates, although mathematically speaking, Nord should mete out more ultimates over time. But then ultimately, again, these two races are very similar in terms of stats. Imperial does offer more max health and max stamina, but again, it's just going to come down to stat preference or just your knowledge of the game and what to tank or how to tank. As for the other races, I have a huge affinity for Breton because in a lot of content, including VAA, VCR hard mode, VAS hard mode, Breton as a race spec is pretty nice. And you also have to take note that for certain races that extra Magicka, or perhaps in the case of Altmer, the extra weapon / spell damage is going to be pretty useful for things like boosting your engulfing flames on your Magicka Dragon Knight and so forth. So again, tank race, bit complicated, but these would be basically my top 3 considerations still. Probably the least helpful race I've found in all my years of tanking, and still up to this patch, is probably going to still be Wood Elf. And you can definitely, I think, put Redguard a little higher up on your list, because they do get a innate return on resources every time they deal damage now. But again, it's gonna ultimately come down to you, your preference for stats, and also your game knowledge. Well, hopefully I summed up nicely and very briefly what races you could consider for the upcoming Blackwood chapter. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. Appreciate every one of you, and see you guys next time.